Good afternoon. I'm Steve McDonald, the Director of the Africa Program and the project on leadership and building state capacity here at the Woodrow Wilson Center. I would like to welcome you all to the center. I want to begin with just a note of thanks to our co-host on this, the Leon Sullivan Foundation, whose President Hope Masters is here with us. Thank you very much, Hope. Welcome. In fact, I knew the Reverend Leon Sullivan very well, worked with him in South Africa. So many years ago, we don't want to talk about it. Today's event here at the center has stirred controversy, as there are many in the Cameroonian community and among international observers who are extremely concerned about the events unfolding in that country as it moves towards the presidential elections scheduled for the 9th of October. In fact, we have been urged not to host a government delegation from Cameroon because of the questions raised about human rights violations, freedom of the press, transparency in the election process, and the fear that the election results will again, as in 2004, be fraught with irregularities and challenged for their validity. The Wilson Center, which was established in 1968 as a living memorial for President Woodrow Wilson, is dedicated to the bringing together of policy and opinion leaders who fashion American policy on issues, international or domestic, together with key actors in a specific arena, and experts, practitioners, and community representatives who live the events about which they, the American policy community, must formulate their policy responses. The Wilson Center is here to provide an impartial platform and open platform for all views to be heard and all sides to be understood, and all issues vetted. Wilson himself, in his 14-point speech in 1918, when referring to how the German nation should be approached after World War I, said that policymakers need, quote, a free, open-minded, and absolutely impartial way of viewing issues. It is in this spirit that we gather here today, and I welcome all of you to the center. We have as speakers several representatives and advisor to the government of Cameroon, the head of the Electoral Board of Elections in Cameroon, and an independent analyst who follows Cameroon for the Congressional Research Services. In our constant search for balanced views, we last year hosted an opposition candidate, Edith Kabang-Wala, Cameroon's only female candidate for presidency this year. So we're happy now to be able to present another perspective on that country's preparations for elections. Our guests will be speaking briefly, giving you a background and some of their perspectives on how things are unfolding. We will then welcome responses and questions from the audience. We hope to end today with some realistic sense of whether or not fairness and transparency will be possible in the coming election, as the title of today's event states. I confess that I do not know the answer. As mentioned above, all observers of Cameroon are concerned with recent events in that country. Just last week, the election authorities in Cameroon disqualified a number of the 51 presidential candidates before the October 9th poll, prompting demonstrations outside the Electoral Commission. I'm sure we'll hear today about the rationale behind that disqualification, but the perception of extra-constitutional infringement is widely held. That rests in part on a variety of issues over the years that remain unresolved, and for which there's evidence that there may be a lack of governmental commitment to constitutional democracy. One such issue is corruption. Another is censorship, which was officially abolished in 1996, but remains a problem, and particularly in recent years, as there have been seizures, suspensions of newspapers, radio stations, and television stations, and harassment and arrests of journalists. The international human rights community has accused the police and military forces of mistreating, torturing, and even killing criminal suspects, ethnic minorities, homosexuals, and political activists. Criticism of the president, ranking officials, or the government at large continues to be met by harassment and physical force by the government. Following government pledges to reform the strongly centralized 1972 Constitution, the National Assembly adopted a number of amendments in December 1995, which were promulgated into a new constitution in January of 1996. The amendments called for establishment of a 100-member Senate as part of a bicameral legislature, creation of regional councils, and the installation of a 7-year presidential term, renewable once. In April 2008, as everyone knows, the National Assembly acceded to constitutional changes proposed by the presidency that removed presidential term limits and provided the president with immunity from prosecution for acts committed while in office. This again had the perception to the outside world of extra-constitutional actions by the president to allow himself to remain in power beyond the one-term limit. So it's evident that there is much and valid international concern about how the election campaign period will unfold, formally beginning, I believe, on September the 25th. And the prospects of political violence are not being discounted given this past record. We hope this session will give us some clarity and confidence that Cameroon is about to join the broader democratic nations of Africa and the world. That is the reason we've gathered today, to hear both the perspectives and wisdom of our guests. Our speakers are going to speak in the following order, and I will briefly introduce them now, and then you have before you their complete bios, so I won't go through their entire biographies. I'm going to invite the ambassador from Cameroon to the United States, Ambassador Joseph B.C. Foe, to come up, and he's going to do a welcome and a scene setter. And he's going to be followed by Minister Komomo, Paul Mingo, who's Director of the Cabinet in the Office of the Prime Minister. And then Fabien Nkot, Senior Advisor to the Prime Minister, will speak. And then the Chairman of the Electoral Commission of Cameroon, Dr. Fokam Samuel Azu, will speak. We will then have a question and answer period for all the time that is allowed after the speaking is finished. I just missed someone. I'm really sorry about that. We are being followed at the end by Alexei Ariev, who's the African analyst for Congressional Research Service, who covers Francophone in West Africa and the Cameroons. And I really apologize, Alexei, for leaving you off that list. So they will speak in that order. Let me at first invite the ambassador to come forward.
Thank you very much. Let me seize the opportunity, first of all, to say thanks to the organizer of this meeting, and particularly you. And I want to thank also all the good people coming here, find time to come and listen to our high delegation coming to expose to you what ELECAM have achieved, what is different. As I used to say to my people, Cameroon has nothing to protect, to defend. We are 50 years old. If you can allow me to make a kind of comparison, our host country, which is a friend country, has 239 years old. That is 2 centuries before Cameroon, who is not only in the half. Being in a good relation, amicable relation with USA. Before the independence, USA opened a consular office in Douala. That is in 1957. In 1959, he opened another consul general in Yaoundé. That before the independence. We have in Yaoundé one of the biggest and most important embassy of United States in Africa. They say that there are only 3, South Africa, Cameroon, and Egypt. So we are here to listen, to show to our friends what we are achieving, and to receive also advices. They used to say in our country, the courses of the rivers has many, many bends, because the river was looking the way by himself.
Alone, yes.
Having a kind and an important friend like USA, we have to come here and to show you as we are and say thank you for your advices, thank you for the auditorium to listen to us, and give me the opportunity now to introduce the panel. You have Dr. Ngogum, he's a minister. He's in charge of the cabinet of the Prime Minister, head of government. He's here. Thank you very much. Dr. Fabien Nkot is a lecturer in the university and also advisor to the Prime Minister. Finally, not the least, the man of the day, the man of the event, President Dr. Faulkner. He will tell you what ELECAM has achieved, why ELECAM is different from ONEL, why ELECAM is different from what had been as practice for the election. That is why you see the title of the conference. Saying that, I say thank you very much, member of the panel, and the floor to you, Minister, please.
Thank you, Ambassador. Okay, Mr. Minister, if you will.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, the Ambassador, His Excellency Fue Atangana. First, I want to thank the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, and especially the Africa Program, for this meeting. Also want to thank our friends of the Leon Sullivan Foundation for their support in co-hosting us this afternoon. The event that has been titled Fairness and Transparency in Cameroon's 2011 presidential election honors my country, especially as it has come at the right moment. It gives us the single opportunity to discuss with you the vision which our president has had for the future of our country. We will also be mentioning the measures taken so far, as well as those proposed in order to ensure true democracy, the respect of human rights, the rule of law, the fight against poverty, unemployment, and corruption. As the Ambassador has said, the presentation will be in 3 parts. I'll start with a general presentation of the Greater Ambitions vision of our President Paul Biya. Then we'll look at the evolution of elections in Cameroon. This will be a chronological approach given by Professor Fabien Cott. And finally, the man of the day will have a presentation on the organization, structure, and the achievements of ELECAM, which is our Independent Electoral Commission. This will be done by its chairman, Dr. Azu Fonkam. Our country has, to some minds, been absent on the international scene. Yet, our government wishes to bridge this gap by improving on the knowledge of Cameroon abroad, starting from the United States of America. Most of our ongoing reforms are unknown. Yet, it is said that it is not enough to be doing something very well. It is also important to let people know what you are doing. As part of the long-term development vision of Cameroon, the government undertook to revise the economic growth and poverty strategy. This led to the production of what is known as the Growth and Employment Strategy paper, in testimony of our government's will to continue efforts aimed at full achievement of the Millennium Challenge development goals. Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow panelists, President Paul Biya's vision for Cameroon is consistent and pragmatic. In his re-election bid in 2004, the head of state defined the guidelines of his second 7-year mandate. The Cameroon of great ambitions, as he so aptly put it, envisages the following. First, the modernization of our democracy, the revitalization of the economy, the edification of a society founded on greater justice and solidarity, the preservation of peace and security, and obviously making Cameroon more visible on the international scene. This vision had indeed guided government policy under President Paul Biya even long before they were pronounced in 2004. They are primordial consideration in all the activities of the state. The head of state has also set out a vision for the next 25 to 30 years. This is contained in the statement, Cameroon, an emerging democratic and united country in diversity. This vision hinges on the results of past studies which have identified the people's needs as well as their aspirations. This overarching policy framework is a forward-looking vision which is a prerequisite for our country's long-term development strategy. It is a common vision that has brought together all the active forces of the nation and which hinges on the head of state's Greater Ambition project. Ladies and gentlemen, Our plan for our the head of state's plan for our country is based on our specific national situation. It takes into consideration the exigencies of our development and the aspiration of our people. In most cases, these reforms have been preceded the prescriptions of our partners because the interest of our citizens is primordial. For instance, the cancellations of the illegal loggings or illegal logging licenses were taken out of discussions with the Millennium Challenge Corporation. This is because we had moved forward on this issue even before we started work with this institution. The recommendation that the National Elections Observatory, NEO, be replaced by a stronger organ had long been made even before we joined the MCA. Elections Cameroon, otherwise known by its acronym ELECAM, has been created. It is an independent election management body which has already been entrusted with the organization of the presidential election for this year, 2011. In our work with the Millennium Challenge account, we are seeking support to reforms that we have already made. We are not making reforms in order to qualify for the MCA. In the short term, as part of this vision, a growth and employment strategy paper for 2010 to 2020 has been elaborated. This strategy is intended to attain two major objectives. First, to eradicate poverty by reducing it to less than 10%. This is obviously what we signed for at the Millennium Development Goals. This will be attained by accelerated job-generating growth and a bold policy on income redistribution. Social services will be extended and improved. This will include health, education, training, water, electricity, and obviously roads. Secondly, we want to become a middle-income country by increasing the average income and consolidating growth over a long period. The growth rate is projected to reach 10% by the year 2017 through increased diversification of our economic activities. Our 10-year development plan has started showing tangible results on the ground, with increase in growth rates from 1.9% in 2009 to 3% in 2010, with inflation, which reduced from 5.3% in 2008, going through 3% in 2009, and today 1.3% in 2010, strides were made in the World Bank doing business classification. The presidential elections of 9th October 2011, in less than a month, will be held in the context of rekindled hope with growth-enhanced strategies. Our president's vision for Cameroon is realistic. Under his guidance, we have scored numerous goals in our stride towards development and modernization. We can rightly conclude that President Paul Biya has successfully realized the Greater Ambitions project which he launched at the beginning of his second 7-year mandate. Thanks to reforms made to modernize our democracy, this year's presidential elections will take place in an atmosphere of freedom. Cameroonians discuss and debate all issues relating to these elections freely, and they participate in the process. In my country, anything can be discussed. There is no topic that is forbidden. There is no taboo topic. These elections will be freer and fairer than previous ones. Millions of electors have registered, and as you did hear from the moderator, 52 Cameroonians declared their candidacy to run for the office of president. These trends indicate that Cameroonians believe that their votes will count and that there is today level playing ground. Electors, candidates, and their supporters are not at all intimidated. No one is compelled to belong to any political party. Our people have the right to make free choices. Political parties carry out their activities freely, and the administration gives them assistance in conformity with the law. In continuation of political reforms, a law has been promulgated to allow our compatriots living abroad to vote in presidential elections and in all referenda. This confirms our commitment to involve all Cameroonians in the political process, wherever they may be. For the first time in the history of our country, our compatriots abroad will vote in an election come 9th October 2011. ladies and gentlemen, in our strive to advance democracy, our country has enabled a free and independent press to flourish, the respect for human rights, and an independent judiciary. One major objective of our head of state has been to promote the rule of law in order to enable a civic culture to prevail. In Cameroon, we are free to express our opinions, any opinion at all, within the framework of the liberty laws enacted by President Paul Biya from 1991 to 1993. A law on social communication was passed. This law has enabled the growth of an independent and vibrant press. Indeed, hundreds of newspapers, radio, and television stations operate in Cameroon. Our citizens have wide and diversified sources of information and channels of free expression. In my country, there are no topics that are forbidden for discussion or for the written press. Constitutional reforms made in 1996 empowered our judiciary. In Cameroon, the judiciary is independent, and it is an authority just like the executive and the legislative arms of our government. Judiciary reforms have enhanced efficiency in the administration of justice and shortened procedures as well as delays in courts. As part of our liberty laws, a National Commission on Human Rights and Freedom was created. The activities of this commission have checked the abuses of human rights and protected the political freedoms of many Cameroonians. Reforms recently made on this commission have reinforced its independence. The civil society and confessional organizations are now involved in the work of the National Commission on Human Rights and Freedoms. Our government is waging a relentless war against corruption. A National Agency for Financial Investigations and an Anti-Corruption Commission, known as KODAK, have been set up to check the embezzlement of public funds and corrupt practices in general. The efforts of these institutions have led to the arrests, the trials, and the imprisonments of persons guilty of embezzling public funds or even of committing corrupt practices. Many former ministers are today still in prison because of such practices. Democracy is not an event. It is instead an ongoing process. The upcoming elections will demonstrate our commitment to make our democracy advance. It will be free, fair, and transparent. Come 9th October 2011, free electors will freely vote a new president of the Republic of Cameroon. Thank you very much for your attention.
Fabien.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. Well, I have been asked to talk to you about the history of election in Cameroon. I think I try to make it very simple for you. You are having all the presentation. Since I've just been given 10 minutes, we'll go through the major point of my presentation for you to be in a position to ask questions at the end of it. So I thought that before talking to you about the history of election in Cameroon, I should mention something about the history of Cameroon itself. You need to know that my country is located in Central Africa. You people usually say West Africa. And it's a country of 20 million inhabitants, a very stable country, one of the most stable in Africa. My country has never been a colony of any superpower. In 1884, Cameroon was a German protectorate. After some of our coastal traditional rulers signed an agreement with some commercial firms, German commercial firms in the area of Douala. After this stage, And when we had the First World War, Cameroon became a mandatory state under the League of Nations. But Cameroon was administrated for the League of Nations by France in one part and Great Britain in the other part. After the League of Nations collapsed, Cameroon became a trusteeship of the United Nations. Cameroon was administrated under the United Nations by France for one part and Great Britain for the other part. And that takes us to the independence of Cameroon in 1960. That is, those are some major points I wanted to mention as far as the political history of Cameroon is concerned. I wanted to highlight that. Why? Because it shows you what are the roots of the vision the minister was talking a few minutes ago. That vision of President Biya is based on the fact that we are a country used to self-political orientation, even though we are open to all our friends around the world. Cameroon is also Africa in miniature. Why? Because if you want to know what you could find in the whole continent of Africa, please don't spend your time going from the Cap to Cairo. Just come back home in Cameroon and you'll find everything around. Talking about the election itself, I wanted to mention that, during the state building process, we had some election in Cameroon because at that time, some political parties were fighting for the independence of Cameroon. I would also like to highlight the fact that Cameroon is with Algeria, the only country who got the independence in fighting. The others' independence were given. So, not everybody was agreeing on what should be the way toward independence. So there were several political parties, and you needed some election to make sure you know which opinion is the dominant. But I think what interests you more is what happened from the independence of Cameroon in 1960. And I mentioned in my third point that election in Cameroon from 1966 until 1990 was conducted within the one-party system. I would like to tell you that in 1966, the first president of Cameroon, President Ahidjo, created a one-party system. That one party was called Cameroon National Union, 1966. From that time until 1987, you had, some type of election. Those elections were not so free, but there were elections. The one party was the one to choose people who will stand for position of members of parliament, councillor at the level of municipality, as well as president of the republic. We had that until 1987. But I want to mention to you that President Biya took office in 1982. And when he took office in 1982, he started by saying, okay, instead of going directly to a multipartism system, we'll start experience of multiple candidates within one party, which is what happened during the legislative election of 1988 and the municipal election, the local election of 1987. So afterward, we had some political evolution in Cameroon, and in 1990, we came back to multipartism. And in 1992, we had multipartist presidential and legislative election. But what I want to stress at this point is that from 1992 until year 2000, the elections were managed by the administration, which is the ministry, the Department of Interiors. In 2000, the President of the Republic created the National Election Observatory. What was the role of the National Election Observatory? It was to observe and to monitor, thanks to Omar, to observe, to supervise, and to monitor the election. But those elections were still organized by the administration. And then the political stakeholders say, no, we don't agree with the National Election Observatory because we think that body is not having enough power to manage the election. Okay. Then come 2006, when the president created ELECAM, which is Election Cameroon. The difference between ELECAM and National Election Observatory is very simple. While National Election Observatory was supervising and observing the election managed by the administration, ELECAM is the one to manage the whole electoral process. That is a major difference. And I would like to stress on the fact that the process in creating National Election Observatory as well as ELECAM was an inclusive process. Why? Because when the president wanted to create those two organs, what he did was very simple. He called all the stakeholders, political parties, religious leaders, members of civil society, and say, how can we improve our electoral process? And they brought their idea, and it is from them that emerged the NEO and ELECAM. Even when they wanted to designate the leadership of NEO and of ELECAM, the president also called for a public consultation, calling all the stakeholders, all the people interested in politics in Cameroon, the political parties, the religious leaders, the civil society leaders, to say, who do you think can be the chairman of ELECAM, for instance? So all the opposition party brought their proposal, and it is from there that the president of the republic was able to appoint the leadership of ELECAM. I would also like to highlight one fact, that Cameroon did all this progress in the field of election, but in the same time, Cameroon was improving as far as human rights was concerned and as far as corruption was concerned. Let me just mention one or two aspects. We have now in Cameroon a human rights commission where you can go and say, I was abused by the government. Please, I need my right to be respected. We are now having an anti-corruption unit in Cameroon which you can call every time, saying that I've been, somebody of the administration tried to corrupt me. Please come and look at what is happening with me. I also wanted to mention the fact that, and the minister mentioned it a few minutes ago, it is for the first time in our short history that we are having the opportunity of the vote of the diaspora. And regarding the forthcoming election of 9th of October, I want to say, to have enough Cameroonians involved in that elections, the state of Cameroon had to spend 23 billion francs CFA. Why? Because to register in Cameroon, you need to have your national identity card. And people were complaining that they don't have money to go and look for a national identity card. So the President of the Republic decided, the government decided that okay, the issuance of the national identity card is free of charge. And the state spent 23 billion francs CFA for that operation. So, Mr. Moderator, those were the major point I wanted to make just to open discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fabien. I appreciate you sticking with your time frame. It's very, very nice. Okay, Dr. Funkom, I think you're up next. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Well, I have been called upon to see one or two things about fairness and transparency in Cameroon's next presidential election. I want to thank you for making this statement sound a positive statement rather than putting it in the form of a question whether there will be fairness and transparency in Cameroon's next presidential election. But I would make this a rhetorical question by providing you the elements that will make you judge whether or not the forthcoming elections will be free and fair. And to do this, you will allow me very quickly say something about the setup and mission statement of the body. I will say something about the electoral system. Then I would say something about our track record. And I would end by saying one or two things about the countdown to E-Day, Election Day. Now, with regard to the setup of Elections Cameroon, Elections Cameroon is in charge of the whole process of organization, management, and supervision, as previous speakers said. It is made up of two organs. There is the Electoral Board and the Directorate General of Elections. But more importantly about the setup of Elections Cameroon is that its organic law states very clearly that Elections Cameroon shall receive no instructions, shall not solicit instructions from any private or public authority. Now, in order to guarantee this, members of the board, though appointed by the President of the Republic after consultation with political parties represented in Parliament and civil society, once appointed, they have security of tenure. For 4 years, the President cannot remove them from office. And if a member wanted to resign from office, or if a member was guilty of some action, for instance, breach of his oath, and had to be removed from office, it is not a decree of the President of the Republic that removes him from office. It is a resolution of the board signed by the chairperson of Electoral Board, who is chairman of Elections Cameroon. We also enjoy financial management autonomy, because the funds of ELECAM are in the form of a consolidated fund. We have a chapter within the state budget. So every year, the Director General prepares the draft budget, which is approved by the board, Electoral Board, submitted to government for discussion, and then it is included in the state budget of the year and constitutes priority expenditure of the state. Money is disbursed a number of times a year. Ideally, this money would have been disbursed at once, but because the country has had some financial problems, this money is disbursed 2 or 3 times in a year. Then the members of the board enjoy immunity from prosecution. In fact, they enjoy an immunity which is at least equivalent to the immunity enjoyed by members of Parliament. Because of the financial resources placed at the state at the disposal of ELECAM, we have within less than 3 years been able to employ close to 2,800 persons who work full-time for Elections Cameroon. We have structures at the central level. We have structures at the level of the 10 regions of the country, at the level of the 58 divisions of the country, and at the local level of 360 council areas of the country. Now, I will now briefly say something about the electoral system of Cameroon, because if ELECAM, or Elections Cameroon, is independent, if it is free, what is the electoral law itself, mindful of the fact that every election management body can only do what the law says it should do. So what does the electoral what is the electoral framework? I would very briefly indicate to you what the law provides during pre-electoral operations. During pre-electoral operations, registration, which is at the heart of the work of an election management body, registration is done by a mixed commission comprising a representative from Elections Cameroon, a representative from the administration, a representative from the local council area, and more importantly, as many representatives of political parties as are active on the field. In some of our major city centers, like Yaoundé and Douala, you would have upwards of 15 members of political parties who sit on the commissions. I wanted to take a little bit of time and explain this to you because that is the body. It is the mixed commission which does registration, not the electoral body alone. Now, the law provides that one member of the commission, in order that the work of the body should not be slowed down, one member of the body can register. But for the results of that registration to be validated, the members must all meet. And at the tail end of the registration exercise, they must write a report confirming or validating everything that was done during the year. Now, the commission that does the registration is the same commission that does the distribution of voters' cards. And once again, this is done by the whole commission, where they sit down and they agree on the modalities for the distribution. Now, during elections, we have two major commissions which are in charge of the electoral process. We have at the level of the polling station, we have a commission that is charged with conducting the elections, wherein comprising a member of Elections Cameroon, a member of the administration, and all the representatives of the candidates standing. Now, if you take the case of this year, where we already streamlined some 21 candidates, pending whether or not the Supreme Court would add more, we would have in each of our polling stations, apart from the two other officials, 21 people who will be there in order to secure the interests of the various political parties or the candidates. The results that are obtained in the voting station are tallied in the office itself during the day. So after elections, the votes are counted and the results are announced. And the result slips are signed by the members, including the representatives of the candidates, and they have copies of those results. These results are quickly centralized at the level of our council office and transmitted within 24 hours to the Divisional Supervisory Commission, which is again made up of representatives from Elections Cameroon, representatives from the administration, and candidates, the representatives of the candidates. This commission tallies the result for a given division, and then they are forwarded to the National Vote Counting Commission, which sits in Yaoundé. They have 3 days within which to do that. At the level of the National Vote Counting Commission, which is chaired by a justice of the Constitutional Council, there are 2 judges of... Can I have a little bit of water? Sorry for that.
Hold on, Misha. nation.
It's okay, it gets quite dry in here.
Now, as I said, at the level of the National Vote Counting Commission, my voice was going. At the level of the National Vote Counting Commission, there is a representative. The chairperson is a justice of the Constitutional Council. There are 2 justices of the Supreme Court and 5 representatives of Elections Cameroon, 5 representatives of the administration, and all the representatives of the candidates. This enables them to overview the results that come in from all the divisional supervisory commissions, and there are 58 of them representing the 58 divisions of the country. That National Vote Counting Commission has 5 days within which to hear any complaints from the candidates or their representatives, and then their findings are forwarded within 5 days to the Constitutional Council, which sits as a court to hear all complaints. And once they are done with their complaints, they now officially declare the results. That takes you 15 days, if my count is correct. It takes you 15 days. And once those results are declared, nobody can challenge them anymore. During the question time, if nobody asks a question on the length of the day, maybe I'll come back to that in order to explain why the legislature in Cameroon thought that we should go through all of this before the results are proclaimed. Now, what has Elections Cameroon done since it was put into place? Apart from recruiting and finding structures for all our offices at the central, regional, divisional, and council area levels, we introduced a number of innovations. Firstly, having regard to the question of registration. We ensure that all those who registered were given a receipt as proof that they had registered, so that if the provisional lists are posted up and their names are not on, they can show proof. Now, you'll know that during from last year till now, what we've been doing is a revision exercise rather than a recompilation. So those who registered and voted in 2007 did not have to be re-registered again. We only called them up to come and confirm their registration by looking at the list that were available. So we issue a receipt for new registers. We now have registers, secured booklets, which we call registers, in which the names of the voters are first recorded before they are encoded. And the law allows every single Cameroonian to come and inspect those registers. And in fact, each time I have visited our structures at regional level, I have done a public demonstration of how we work by showing them how the software, how the encoding is done, and how you can verify to see whether there are duplicates in registration, cases of multiple registration, whether there are people who are underage who are on the list, and so on and so forth. How am I doing in terms of time?
You're going over, but so begin to wrap up.
Okay. Now, we also are mindful of the need for us to work with the stakeholders. And consequently, we have held a number of consultation fora with major stakeholders, the administration, the judiciary, political parties, civil society. The important thing being that within the Cameroonian context, the judiciary is we consider the judiciary to be part of the stakeholders since they sit on some of our commissions. Now, one or two things on the countdown to election day. The President of the Republic convened electors to the polls on the 30th of August last, and we had 5 days within which to ask candidates to submit their files. These were submitted, and the deadline, in fact, fell on a Sunday. And on that Sunday, we kept our offices open till midnight. And within the 5 days, we were able to receive a record 52 candidates. The law requires that once we receive those candidatures, we must examine them in order to draw the short list of the candidates. And we must do this at least 20 days before election day. We had an interest to do this speedily because we could not go ahead to print the ballot papers for the candidates without knowing their names. So we did this expeditiously in order to advance the process. Now, cards will be distributed very soon from now. And those who do not succeed in receiving their cards, the law provides that cards that are not distributed will be placed at the disposal of electors in their respective polling stations where they can pick them up. But if you do not succeed to pick up your voter's card, you can vote without your voter's card provided your name is on the electoral list, which is posted up in each polling station. And you provided, of course, that you identify yourself with your national ID card. We have also done a lot in order to produce literature, which gives information on what will be done. The Electoral Board and the Director General will publish a couple of documents. They are guides for observers who are accredited by the Ministry of Territorial Administration. We have guides for those who run polling stations. And there is going to be training. There's going to be training of those officials before election day. And we are actually looking forward to holding some training seminars with the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, IEF. The Commonwealth delegation came to visit us too in Cameroon, and they promised cooperation in the training of staff. I think I would like to end here, and then we'll take your questions as they come up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fidel. And Lexi, I won't forget you this time. If you'll forgive me, please give us some independent remarks here. Oh, yes. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and thanks to the Wilson Center and to Steve for putting together this event. To sort of be more broad about things, it's not every day that those of us who live in Washington get to spend an afternoon talking about Cameroon and thinking about Cameroon. So I hope that the Q&A will provide plenty of opportunity for a more in-depth discussion and an exchange of ideas. I should note before I get started that I'm speaking here in my personal capacity, and my remarks should not be construed as representing the Congressional Research Service or the Library of Congress. I'd like to first take a step back since we've heard a lot about the sort of more technical aspects of this election. At a time when so many eyes are currently focused on the Arab Spring that is unfolding in the Middle East and North Africa, it's worth reflecting, even if this seems far-fetched, on the wave of pro-democracy uprisings that took place in sub-Saharan Africa in the early 90s. Cameroon was one of many countries, as the panelists have described, that experienced this wave of opposition, contestation, and opening. And in Cameroon, this reached a head in 1990 to 1991 when mass demonstrations and a general strike prompted the Cameroonian government to authorize, at least formally, multi-party democracy and initiate other, albeit limited, reforms. Across the continent at that time, new parties were springing up, new media outlets were being authorized, national consultations were held in some countries, and authoritarian regimes were seemingly forced to cede political space, if only in many places and in retrospect in a fairly limited fashion. Many in this room I know have been watching the preparations for the Cameroonian elections with great interest. This is to be the fourth presidential election since this democratic quasi-opening in the early 90s. Certainly the fourth since Cameroon first allowed multi-party competition. President Paul Biya of the CPDM will face at least 20 challengers, depending on this process of sort of contesting the candidates who were excluded to date. These 31 candidates whose candidacies were not approved possibly will, some of them may be able to enter the race as well. All in all, we can expect, I think, the campaign period to be quite vocal and dynamic. I would anticipate participation in public debates and discussions from a wide range of civic actors, including the media, civil society, and opposition politicians. So clearly, at first glimpse, this is not the sort of single-party authoritarianism or military rule that were prevalent in Africa in the 1970s and 80s. At the same time, however, many Cameroonians feel that the promise of the democratic opening of the early 90s was never fulfilled. And this is due to a combination of factors, I think. Even at the start of that process in 1992, with the first multi-party elections, legislative elections were boycotted by several key opposition groups, and President Biya, who had assumed power in 1982, was returned to office. Post-election riots were crushed. Some members of nascent opposition groups and editors at newly created private media outlets were convinced to cooperate with the powers that be in return for financial or other favors. Others found themselves under arrest or otherwise subject to harassment and other types of restrictions. I mention this even though it's now been 20 years because this pattern of self-perpetuation by the ruling authorities, patronage, elite co-option, opposition boycotts and threatened boycotts, violent political contestation, and frustration has repeated itself in the years since. It has contributed to widespread political apathy, I think, among many Cameroonians. For example, in 2004, President Biya won ostensibly with 70% of votes cast. However, according to Freedom House, this represented a mere 31.7% of the electorate. The opposition, spearheaded at times by John Fruendi, who is himself adept at self-perpetuation, having founded the SDF in 1990 and having been its presidential candidate ever since, has never recognized a poll outcome. In 2008, mass demonstrations and riots erupted over high food prices and President Biya's plans that have since been realized to amend the Constitution to allow himself to run for office again. These protests were harshly repressed, and sporadic demonstrations have taken place since, though not on that scale. This cycle of politics in Cameroon has fed a host of socio-political ills, including growing ethno-regional polarization, pervasive corruption born of political patronage, a sense among many Anglophones that they're not represented in the social contract, and persistent feelings among many Cameroonians that neither their government nor other political actors fully represent them. The International Crisis Group has referred to this dynamic as a slow burn crisis of expectations. So in this context, the stakes of each election cycle with its potential promise of greater representation and accountability in government are quite high. There's been much discussion of ELECAM, its technical operations, its organizations and authorities, but it's important to see ELECAM, I think, in a broader context. To come back to this year's election, the government has taken steps to address some criticisms of ELECAM since it was constituted in 2008. And ELECAM officials, as we've seen today, have promised a free and fair vote. Yet, while limited steps to improve transparency and representativeness are welcome, of course, they have not assuaged the doubts that many Cameroonians feel about the political process. Nor have been terribly constructive repeated SDF threats to sabotage the electoral process, including through violence if they feel that it's not fair or advantageous to them. On a more basic note, the prospect of President Biya's likely re-election for another 7-year term has punted the vital question of who will succeed him further down the road, which has heightened domestic and international concerns over possible instability and constitutional uncertainty should the president, who is 78, become incapacitated in office. U.S. officials who are not, we should be clear, sort of Cameroon's not necessarily at the top of senior U.S. officials' list on any given day, but they have expressed interest in the conduct of these elections. In 2010, USAID initiated funding for a small program to strengthen the public's role in the electoral and in the democratic process. The congressional budget justification for that year warned that without increased participation ahead of this year's election, the public could be, quote, forced to resort to violent or non-democratic means to effect change. U.S. officials have likewise publicly reiterated that Cameroon is expected to hold a free, fair, and credible presidential election, as Secretary of State Hillary Clinton put it earlier this year. At his Senate confirmation hearing last year, U.S. Ambassador Robert P. Jackson stated that, quote, promoting democracy, human rights, and the rule of law would be among his highest priorities. He also noted that free, fair, and transparent preparations for the elections would be, as he put it, as important as the elections themselves. While, of course, the international community will be observing these elections closely, it is, after all, up to Cameroon's own leaders to demonstrate that they are capable of change, that they feel accountable to the significant segment of the population that turned out in the 2008 protests, and that this election can be run with fairness and transparency, as I think everyone in this room would hope to see. It is likewise up to other actors, including those outside the government, to be responsible and to contribute peacefully to what many Cameroonians, I think, hope one day to experience, which is the full exercise of democracy. With that, I look forward to the question and answer session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexi. I think that was a perfect rounding off presentation. Obviously, I think picking up on something that Alexi said, we've got a situation in Cameroon, I think, where expectations are very high. And promises abound, as we've heard here today, that these elections will be different than past elections, and that the issues of corruption and human rights, freedom of the press, and et cetera, are being addressed. We want to believe that. We hope to believe it. We certainly wish the country well for these elections, but suspicions still abound because of past performance. So I think it's fair that and appropriate and timely that we're having this forum today. So let me open it up to questions and statements from the audience. Let me remind you that we are being webcast live. So please wait for a microphone before you begin to speak. After I recognize you, identify yourself and your association, and keep your remarks as short as you possibly can. I will be monitoring that. Okay, first hand I see is right here.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I am Ed Barber, a senior advisor with Good Works International. Full disclosure, we are working with the government on some of these issues. My question is for Dr. Azu'u. I noted that in your discussion of ELECAM's achievements, you did not mention the number of new voters registered, what percentage that represents of potential voters, and the UN role in this process, all of which strike me as fairly important. Would you do that, please?
Okay, before we pick up an answer from the panel, let's take 2 or 3 questions. I think we'll get through more that way. And then we'll let, if you're addressed specifically, as Dr. Foucault was then, you can answer that question, or any panel member can chip in. I see another hand right here in front.
Oh, thank you. I'm Dan Whitman. Hello, Fabien.
Hello. Hello.
When the question of the constitutional amendment came up several years ago, there was quite a bit of open challenge or criticism of this measure by the United States and other Western countries. I'm curious if you can tell us what was the internal discussion, if you're able to say so, that convinced the president and his advisors to go against that advice.
Okay, very good. We'll take one more. Do I see a hand right here? This one. Ali.
I'm Martin Junkeng, Chairman of Cameroon Congress of America. My question is this. The final result, the body that proclaimed the final result, I think that the 5 member of the administration and the member of the Supreme Court should not have been part, of the body proclaiming the final result. Because if people want to contest, they should go to that Supreme Court, to contest the election. So if they can elaborate a little bit on that, that would be fine. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think that gives us enough to respond to. They seem to all start and end with you, Dr. Foucault. So.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ed, Mr. Baba. Thank you very much for that question. Because of the time constraints, I did not mention that. We have succeeded since last year to register 2.5 million people, as against 5,067,000 which voted in 2007. That represents an increase of about 50%. Now, if you compare that figure, the population of Cameroon stands at roughly 20 million. That of the Ivory Coast is 21 million. And you'll know that the last elections in the Ivory Coast were postponed a couple of times. The international community invested heavily in that election. It's gone down on record as being one of the most expensive elections ever to be organized on the continent. In spite of this, they did not register up to 6 million people. In fact, it was about 5.6 million people. And another point of note, special point of note, is that the electoral age in Cameroon is 20 rather than 18. And the age bracket, between the age bracket of 18 to 20, most of them in secondary school, it will run into more than 1 million, close to 2 million people, just that age bracket. So anyone who judges our record should judge our record bearing in mind these two fundamental ingredients. And I would say here that those who say that there was voter apathy, I think they're saying something else. I don't think we at Elecam believe that there was any voter apathy. And those who saw the queues on the last few days, in spite of my repeated calls that people should not wait for the last few days, I think Mr. Nkot mentioned, Professor Nkot mentioned that in Cameroon you need the ID card, which is expensive. And so the state proceeded by first reducing the price and then totally making it free. So if we didn't have a limitation with national ID card, I am sure that far many more people would have registered. Now, if I could also quickly take the question on term limits, and I don't speak here as president of Elecam, I speak as a university don and as a jurist myself. When that debate was on in Cameroon, I did writings and postings on that. I said I personally see nothing wrong with lifting term limits because not all countries, Britain, the mother of democracies, there are no term limits in Britain. And in most of the countries, in Germany, there are no term limits. I think the majority of countries in the world do not have term limits. What I said then was that the important thing is to have an electoral system that allows people to be voted in and out. If you are voted in and you do not do the job, after one term you'll be voted out. So if we have a proper electoral system, I wouldn't be personally concerned about term limits. Now, with regard to the question by Mr. Martin Junkem, the final results. The final results are proclaimed by the Constitutional Court. Only the Constitutional Court. What you meant maybe is the National Vote Counting Commission, which comprises the chairman is a justice of the Constitutional Court. There are 2 justices of the Supreme Court. There are 5 members of the administration, 5 members of Elecam, and then all the representatives of the candidates who stood for the elections. This is the commission that sits down and goes through all the results in order to see whether there were any calculations, results were badly calculated, or whether there were any petitions from anywhere that were not properly addressed. And I happen to have sat on that commission. I sat on that commission in 2007, and I actually argued cases in front of the Supreme Court concerning, so I know what I'm talking about. It enables all the participants to be able to argue their case. And they came with all sorts of evidence, videotapes of the operations. They went to all lengths in order to prove their case before that commission, which makes a report now that goes to the Constitutional Council, which sits as a court. Thank you.
Paul, Fabian, or Alexis, would you want to comment on any of these, particularly on the discussion around the term limits? Anything else to?
No, I have nothing to say. I think he said everything.
Okay. All right, we'll take another round of questions. I see one right in the middle here to begin.
Thank you. My name is Kenneth Nde, and I'm the founder of the American Association of Cameroonians. I would want to follow up from Mr. Whitman's question regarding term limits, why Elecam included the name of candidate number 4 in their list of 21. because the incumbent is actually barred from running for office according to Article 6, Section 2. He took his final mandate in 2004 because the change of constitution in 2006 meant that he was renewable only once. So he took oath in 2004 and is therefore not eligible for office. So we're preparing a case to sue ELECAM at the level of the Supreme Court for including candidate number 4. So would they please explain that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kenneth. Next one is the gentleman right here in the middle, Ali. Thank you.
My name is Jules Conchu. I'm a member of an opposition political party based in Cameroon. If I want to talk, I can talk for 2 hours. But I'll be very
Do
short.
not try.
I have a question for all of you up there. What do you think the election is for? The election is to get the best among us to lead us. Do you believe the process in Cameroon will allow Cameroonians to get the best of them to lead them? That's my first question. My second question is about Paul Biya. People support him. In more than 29 years, over 29 years, the guy did not do anything for Cameroonian. How come somebody among you can come and support him? That's my question. I can keep asking questions, but I will stop here.
Okay.
And at the end, I will have an opportunity to discuss with those guys.
Okay, thank you very much. I was going to stop you there. That's very good. And right at the back.
Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Samuel Nixon with the African American Church here in the local area. I lived in Cameroon from 1992 to 93 and watched the elections at that time. And one of the questions I have for this upcoming election part is I noted the way the elections were portrayed through the media within Cameroon. And my question of the panel is this time around, in terms of the distinctions between what happened in that period for that election and this one, what are the expectations that you have of how the election will be portrayed and what differences there will be in the media representation? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll leave the questions at that for response by any or all of the panel members. And I think James's question should not be dismissed. I mean, what do we see is necessary in a leader, and why does Paul Biya fill that role in your mind, and what do you expect from your leadership? But also, of course, the fourth member of the
yes,
a question of such detail that I have no idea who you're talking about.
No, the fourth person on the list is President Paul Biya.
Oh, okay.
Yes, just to clarify the issue.
No, that's what he said.
And his point is that he was not supposed to run for president this time. So we had this debate in Cameroon, and some of my close colleagues at the university were involved in that. Some saying, because it is the same question of was it relevant to have this amendment of the Constitution to let President Biya run again, or was it not relevant? At the end of the day, I think we closed the issue. Very simple, because we had, apart from the media, we had a meeting between the political scientists and the jurists at the university. And we agreed that, look, it is not through the media that you are going to decide who will run for president. At the end of the day, you are having a body in Cameroon who is saying that this person is qualified to run and this person is not qualified. Number one is ELECAM. They are doing the first screening. And if you don't agree with the decision of ELECAM, then you can appeal to the Constitutional Court. And at the end of the day, the scholars are not the one to say who is going to run for president in Cameroon. The Constitutional Court of Cameroon is the institution to say who is going to run. And that institution is going to do its job. So we cannot start, a quarrel here to say, okay, I agree that he would have run for president. No, I don't agree. At the end of the day, ELECAM did the first screening, and the Constitutional Court is going to do the job. That is a very simple answer to that question. Number two, what do you think the election is for? And do you think within the framework of this election we are going to choose the relevant elite to lead Cameroon? Is it your question? Yes. If I was to speak just as a scholar, I would say there is a debate within some scientific articles at the university to say in Africa are elections the best way of selecting the political elite. That debate exists, but the state of Cameroon says we are selecting the political elite of Cameroon through election, and we are trying to modernize the electoral process, as you can see on this presentation. I think Cameroon is not heaven. Nobody is saying that. But what we are saying here is that we are improving in the field of modernizing the electoral process of the country. That is all. And we are giving the major steps we were able, to reach. So you also asked a question, but maybe I'll leave the minister the opportunity to answer that question about the President of the Republic. Yes, not having done something for 29 years.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, perhaps before going to that particular question, I could happily just answer his first question. Do you believe in the elections? I think from the presentation of President Fonkam Azu, I would say yes. Personally, I believe. You have the right. We've been talking about freedom here. You have the right to believe or not to believe. If I see something has changed, and I know that changes are not meant just for changes, and I think that what they have done has been very different from what has been happening in the past, then I believe that these elections will be as he is putting it. Now, to the next question. Why do we still support somebody who for 29 years has not done anything? I don't know whether you came late, but I think in my presentation I did show what has been done even just the past 7 years. But if you want that we say what he has done from 1982, we can start quoting it. For anybody who has been reading, for anybody who's been to Cameroon of late, he would have seen the changes in the economy, the changes in infrastructure, the changes in the political and even, the freedom that we talked about. I think there is no place in Africa where we have more than 300 papers on which anybody can say anything. You abuse the president as you want. Nobody takes you to court. I think that's unheard of anywhere. So I just want to say that, yes, he has done a lot of things, and I think we can still have the right to believe in him. But as we say, he's just a candidate out of 21. And any Cameroonian has the possibility of choosing one out of the 21.
May I follow up, though, on James's question in the sense that, is he safe and able to go back? Because he's obviously feeling very strongly about President Biya. And I know that you've said there is freedom of the press and there's openness and et cetera, but the only thing that jumps to my immediate mind is Magic FM being closed down in 2008, and this was a Voice of America radio, and their equipment was confiscated, et cetera, all because of critical broadcasts. Is that kind of freedom really there? We keep hearing about incursions on freedom of the press and openness of assemblage.
Yes, before the minister says something, I would like to talk about what you are pointing out. The issue about Magic FM has nothing to do with politics.
Well, I just mentioned that one because it came to mind.
Has nothing to do with politics. This is the truth. Okay, because let me remind to you another issue which I was talking about a few months ago with my colleague Rostan Imianyo. We came here in the US and we were told that a very important journalist in Cameroon, Bibi Ngota, passed away in the jail. So I met with some people and I said, yes, it's very important when someone passed away because it is a human being and we are very sorry for that. But don't put it as Bibi Ngota was a very great journalist in Cameroon. And I said, I will be in Washington in 3 months' time. I would like you to gather the newspaper of Bibi Ngota. When I'm back, you present them to me, and we start discussing how important he was within the press in Cameroon. Nobody was able to present one newspaper to me. So, it is an issue that somebody passed away in the prison of Cameroon. We need to improve that, and we are working on that. But don't say that a very great journalist passed away because he was trying to do his job and he was taken to prison and he was killed there. No, that is not the truth. So let me tell you the issue of Magic FM because I was following that issue very closely. Under the supervision of the Minister Director of Cabinet, Magic FM create a daily court in the radio, on the air. That is, every day, you will stay in your home, call Magic FM, say, my neighbor, I don't like my neighbor because my neighbor is doing this, is doing this, is doing this. And the program was called Tribunal Public. That is a public, court. Yes, public court. So the people of Magic FM will say, okay, why are you saying you don't like your neighbor? And you will explain. They will say, no, your neighbor is guilty, so we are condemning your neighbor here in this our court because we don't think what your neighbor is doing is good. The authority cannot accept that. What is that? Because they were condemning people on the basis of which law? We just have one law in Cameroon. No, the freedom of expression does not give you the authorization to create a private tribunal, a private court. I don't think even here in America, the authorities of America will accept that. Oh, is it?
Actually, they will. Let's return. We've left aside Reverend Nixon's question on the differences between 1991 and
yes.
today.
If I could say something on that, the press in Cameroon is taking very keen interest in what is happening. In fact, while I have been here, I've received repeated calls from members of the press with whom I have very cordial working relations, asking for interviews because they want to be part and parcel of this process. And during the national consultation, which we had, the press was invited. They are people we look up to because we know they play an important role in informing the public. So the press, their expectations are high, and we are giving them all the information to be able to truly and fairly inform Cameroonians. With regard to Mr. Ndel's suing of Elekam, well, that's fine. You'll have your day in court. As a teacher of law, I say that one of the fundamental rights of every citizen is that you have your day in court. And let me tell you, we happen to have a Supreme Court which hears litigants in person. I stood for someone in the Supreme Court who sued the President of the Republic, and he as a litigant in person. That doesn't happen in too many jurisdictions in the world. He came, it's a president of one of the parties, AMEC, Tabi Joachim Owono, he's one of the candidates this year. He sued the President of the Republic and appeared before, it was a full bench of the Supreme Court that met to hear his case. And when I stood up to speak in the court, I said, this is the greatest thing that can happen in any nation, that the full bench of the Supreme Court of the land, the highest tribunal in the land, would meet to hear a litigant in person who, in fact, is not even a trained lawyer. So you will have your day in court, Mr. Ande, and I'm not afraid. If I was the one called up to listen to you, I wouldn't be afraid to face you in court.
Well, all we can ask from the outside is that any process that is a challenge, that is there are irregularities, that there is a court process in order to settle it. As long as there's a legal rule of law, a process that will be honored at an independent court. We here in the United States, particularly those of us who are Democrats in 2001, know how that process works, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose.
Absolutely.
Okay, next question here, and then there and there. Here, right in front.
A microphone.
Wait.
Oh, thank you. Actually, I'm not going to ask a question.
Okay.
I am part of this honorable delegation that came in.
Welcome.
And I just needed to add something to what the head of delegation said to my compatriot, Mr. Conchu. Was that the name?
Mm-hmm,
yes,
James.
sir. I just wanted to say that I'm called Madame Tanyimbianyo. I'm the advisor to Cameroon's Minister of Economy. And when you say nothing has been done, we're not going to go into the political domain. We are going to stay in the economic domain, what I can talk about. And I want to tell you that a lot has been done. And to prove it, we have here the vision 2035. This is our long-term vision. It hasn't stayed a vision. This was here since 2009, and it's being implemented as we speak. We have the growth and employment strategy paper as well. This gives us what we want to call our 10-year development program with details and costs. It's a little different from the last time you were home. If you come home now, this is what you're going to see. It's the main framework of our long-term development in Cameroon, but it is ongoing. It's from here they picked up all of the infrastructure priority areas that are ongoing. If you came to Yaoundé, you won't believe the town you're seeing. Lots have been done, not from a political point of view, but from an economic point of view. I just want to assure you that. And I want to add that we also have a website. Cameroon is actually working with the MCA to be eligible. Like the head of delegation said, two things I retained from his presentation. It is not enough to do things, to do a lot of things. It's not enough for the country to undergo reforms. These reforms have got to be known. And I say this, I'll put up my hat of part of the diaspora. I used to go to school right here. I went to school in UT Austin. And then I used to think just like most of the Cameroonians here. Nothing was happening back home. Trust me, I believe that. And then I went home and I was pleasantly surprised. What was the problem? Information gap. There is always that gap in information that exists. And I'm calling on my compatriots and on all of you here to go onto a website. Please note it very well. We call it the mca-cameroon.org. On this website, you're going to see all of what is concrete about Cameroon. Unfortunately, it is linked directly to the indicators of the MCA. Doing business, fiscal policy, all of the laws on elections, you will find them there. Some of the criticisms they make, you will find newspaper clippings about all what is being said about the topics in Cameroon. If you looked at that, it has nothing to do with politics. It has only to do with the indicators of the MCA. Please note it and go on it. You will find copies of this.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. We are running out of time. As a matter of fact, we'll run out of time. So I will honor the two hands that I said could ask a question, but please be very brief.
I am Chief Bajombi III, the chairperson for Cameroon Royal Council, Cameroon USA, and the vice traditional ruler of Babungo in Goktunja, where the director of cabinet comes from. Before asking my question, I just want to thank him for the wonderful job he's been doing, because I go to Cameroon twice a year, and like our advisor said, it's true, information gap. When you go to Cameroon, you'll be surprised. First question, will you, LACAM, consider having an interactive meeting with your American counterpart, the Federal Election Commission, or you have already done that? Second question, are we going to have debates, that is presidential candidates having debates? Thank you very much.
Okay, and then the final question, please be brief.
Hi, my name is Mireille Diopé from the Foreign Policy in Focus at the Institute for Policy Studies. My question to you, Steve, you should have asked about tolerance administrative. Ask them what does that mean. Okay, to come to Mr. Paul Mingo, I have a question for you. You said something about preservation of peace. Okay, are we talking about negative peace or positive peace? Because the negative peace is sustained by structural violence, and the positive peace leads to sustainable development. So which one are you talking about?
What was the first question, please?
Tolerance administrative.
Okay.
Coming to you, Mr. Coates. My question to you is to know, we have 64% of our population are under 40 years old. When they say that Paul Biya is a personification of the state apparatus of Cameroon, what do you think about it?
Okay.
Coming to Mr. Fonkamazo, how do you sleep with yourself? Excuse me?
Fonkam, madam.
Mr. Fonkam, Samuel Fonkamazo, how do you sleep with yourself at night, knowing that you are a former member of the CPDM party and today you are president of Election Cameroon? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. You don't have to tell us how you sleep at night, but as you make your responses, panel, as you make your responses, then if you have any closing remarks, because this will be our last, we are over time now. So if you want to say any closing remarks as well.
Okay, so I start from this.
Yes, start from this end, go right to the.
Yes, I think my sister there did give me one question on the preservation of peace. And I think when I talked of preservation of peace, I meant peace in all its aspects. Social peace and what else? I don't know why you want to separate the two. Peace is peace. No? Well, peace is peace. Well, I think it depends on the perception of each and every one of us. I believe that it depends on you. For me, peace means social peace and all other aspects of peace that you can think of. So I think that we're talking about preservation of peace, which is ongoing in Cameroon. We've said that we are not perfect, but that we are doing everything to make sure that there is peace that reigns in the country. And then, Mr. Moderator, I just want to say thank you, just as I said from the beginning, to the Woodrow Wilson Center for Africa. I also want to thank Leon Sullivan Foundation for this opportunity. And my dear brother did say that we could be talking even after. And I did say that one of the things that Cameroon has not been doing is coming up to talk. This interaction should continue. And that will make us, and then for those of you who have not been to Cameroon, we invite you, come home more often, and you'll see whether truly these changes we're talking about exist or not. So I want to thank all of you for coming, and I say, let's wait for 9th October, and we'll know what happens in Cameroon.
Okay, thank you. Fabian?
Yes, I was asked to say what I think about Paul Biya being the incarnation of the state. Is it? Personification. Who said that? Okay. And you want me to explain what you are saying?
Okay.
Yes. Okay. But I was not aware of that. Maybe I'll try to learn from you. Okay. So let me take a question which was asked to the president of ELECAM. I know he's going to answer the question in a relevant way. But the question was, why is him sitting as chairman of the electoral board while he was once a member of the CPDM? But I don't know if you all are aware of what the situation is in Cameroon. One of all the major opposition leaders of Cameroon were members of the CPDM. And nobody is saying that since Mr. Frundi was a member of the CPDM, Mr. Frundi is not a relevant opponent to President Biya. We are not saying that. We are not saying that since Mr. Ekindi Jean-Jacques was the chairman of the very important section of the CPDM in the Vuri division, and he is now hunting for the lion. We are not saying that he is not a relevant opponent to President Paul Biya. So the only fact that someone was member of the one-party system at a certain moment of its life does not prevent him to achieve a great job after. Although you are thinking that Mr. Frundi, because he was a member of the one-party system, the CPDM, the party of President Paul Biya, therefore Mr. Frundi is not a relevant opponent. You cannot make that argument. So I give the floor to you, Mr. President. Maybe.
Thank you very much. Our friend who asked a question about presidential debates, it doesn't come within the compass of the things ELECAM does to organize debates. If there are any such debates, ELECAM is not the body to organize that. Meetings, interactive meetings with American counterparts, if they wanted to, I'm willing. My other colleagues of electoral commissions in Africa will be coming to Cameroon. My Nigerian colleague, when he invited me to Nigeria, he is available to come to Cameroon as well in order to observe the elections. With regard to my having accepted that job, let me tell you, young lady, that belonging to a political party does not define who you are. People have intrinsic values, which they take. Good people make good political parties. Political parties don't make people. I have values. Those who know me know I have certain values, and that I take those values. And I have lots and lots of young Cameroonians I've trained at the university. They know who I am as a person. That's what is more important to me, not what people say about me who don't get to know me. I'm sure that if you got to know me, you'll be able to say that I can accept that job and do that job. I think that's all. I sleep well. Look at me. Do I look like someone who doesn't sleep well? Now, I want to, I know there's another question on administrative tolerance, yes, which Mr. Nkor will talk about. I want to thank you, want to add my voice to that of the minister, to thank you for this opportunity for us to be able to say the things we are doing. Because very often people think the worst of you because they know little about you. Now that we've started this process, which we hope is an ongoing process, let us talk, let us debate, let us not fight. If we have to fight at all, let's fight at the level of ideas rather than the things. I think one of the things I tell my students is you must let people have their day. 2 rules of natural justice. Hear the other side. And then, of course, no one should be a judge in his own case. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Max. Just to say thank you, but that have been said. About tolerance administrative, I don't want to forget that one. Let me tell you the story. It's very simple. The minister stated a few minutes ago that we are having something like 13 radio and television. More than 47 radio and television. Just 3 or 4 of these complies with the rules and regulation of Cameroon. For them to be on air is just administrative tolerance. So, if the authorities wanted to respect the law of the country, would have had 4 or 5. Tolerance administrative gives the opportunity to those who did not comply with the rule of and regulation of the country to be on air. That is the truth. Thank you.
Okay. And Alexis, you as well.
Thanks. This has been a really interesting discussion, and thanks again for the opportunity to participate. I would just make one comment in observing this discussion, which is that I think that there's always a temptation to separate sort of technical aspects and technical reforms and sort of technocratic activities from a broader political context. And I think some of the divide here is between sort of an emphasis on technical actions and sort of an understanding that these actions take place in a much broader and more complicated political context. And I think that this sort of process toward what we might hope would be greater openness and greater democratic accountability will be a deeper process than, or if it takes place, would be a deeper process than mere sort of small tinkering with regulations and activities. And on that note, I hope to see more Cameroon events in the future, perhaps hosted by Wilson Center.
Okay, thank you, Alexis.
Thank you.
All right. Well, as I close, before I adjourn our meeting, I began my remarks, as you'll recall, by talking about the Woodrow Wilson Center's mandate to try to better inform and engage policymakers on issues of concern, such as Cameroon and the coming elections. I see that we may have served a broader and maybe better purpose here today of bringing Cameroonians together, because obviously you all need to be talking to each other a lot more. And I know there's always a disconnect between the diaspora in particular and home and particularly their government officials, and I think it's very critical. And I do hope you take a little time to talk afterwards. So I'm glad that has happened. And let me end with just a remark that our sister who brought it up as a question but gave us the right word that I think we should leave on, and that is peace. We all hope for peace. We all want peace, and let's pray that it happens on October the 9th. Thank you very much. Welcome our panel.